Hey there guys, and welcome back. So, Mythic Table is a virtual tabletop that I have been using for a few months now to run a side campaign that I've been running for Pathless Podcast. Intention of the campaign was just to have fun and kind of get some game time in while the other DMs were getting their campaigns back together. And the reason I decided to go with Mythic Table is, one, it's a new one, so it's nice to try it out on a side campaign, and two, it's really easy to set up the map and set up a bunch of other features, so that's why I've been using it. However, Mythic Table is in development, it is in beta, so there are a lot of features that it does not have. And that is the premise of this video. I went ahead and decided to go ahead and write a browser extension in order to implement features that I needed. Basically what it comes down to is that I have run a bunch of large-scale battles. Just as an example, let's say 10 plus of the same exact enemy, and it becomes really difficult to find goblin, let's say number 1, in a crowd of 20 goblins without an initiative tracker that actually picks out the goblin for you. So because that's an issue that I've run into, and it one of those things, I don't know when the dev team will be implementing such a feature, I decided to implement that myself. And that's what we're showcasing. The code is up on GitHub. I will leave the link in the description. I literally pushed the final version, or at least the final version for the moment, because there's probably more features that I would like to add, but the final version for the moment was pushed like 2 minutes ago. And I actually forgot to add the GitHub link before I went live now, but like I said, that will be added as soon as I get done doing the demo. So here is a basic map, just a default map here. I've got 2 characters here, and in order to initialize this extension, you actually have to come up here to the extension itself and click on it. And you can ignore this stuff in the box right here. We'll cover this feature next. More importantly, we're going to start out with the initiative. So, 2 things happened when we clicked on the extension button and triggered the extension page action. Technically speaking, what is happening there. We got this token right here, which has no image, but as you can see, it's the GM character. And we also have the initiative tracker now. I will go over all the technical details in the second half of this stream. Right now I just want to demo how you would use it, assuming that you've come here having downloaded the extension and want to see how to make it work. So we'll go into the code and the technical aspects of it later on for anybody that's interested. For the time being, let's just talk about how it works. So I'll go ahead and pull the gobbo out here, and as you can see, nothing has happened. I pulled the goblin out, but there is nothing in the initiative tracker. And that is because the way this works is we use these tags, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and copy out this current combat tag right here, paste it into the gobbo, and as you can see, it says null. But it is now on the initiative tracker. The reason it says null is, as you might suspect over here, there are other attributes we can set, which is initiative and initiative bonus. So we'll pop back out here. We'll go ahead and drag Barty McBardface over here onto the board. As you can see, Barty McBardface is at the top of the initiative because 10 is greater than no value at all. Just how I decided to sort it. We'll come in here and paste these guys in here, save this, and these guys are tied right now, which is why nothing changed. However, you can see that this is now 10, and if you hover on it, it has the +3, just to indicate that that's their initiative bonus. So let's play with this a little bit. So, +4 initiative bonus, and now the gobbo is sorted above Barty McBardface. As you might expect, if he's got negative bonus, it goes back to the bottom. And furthermore, again, as anticipated, give him initiative 15, he's above Barty McBardface. I'm going to go ahead and pull out another goblin token now. And we'll give him the stuff at current combat. And let's go ahead and just set this to something low. So 5. So he comes in at the bottom, and now we have 3 guys in the combat. I'm going to go ahead and hit this arrow right here. These are for the GM. They will initialize, well, they'll basically step through the initiative. So click it, and as you can see, a few different things happened. 1, we got this yellow outline on random Gobbo 1 here. And 2, it selected them on the board. 3, it populated the macro bar. There's something else that happened in the background, but it's more of a technical aspect, so I'll breeze over that, pass over that for right now. Hit this again, and as you can see, we can navigate up and down the list, and it wraps around as necessary. And as we do that, you'll see the macro bar changing at the same time that tokens are being selected. If it's hard to see the green outline on Barty McBardface, that's just because of how his token is stylized. I've got it stylized special for a reason. We will get to that in the second part, or not the second part, but when we get to the next feature. So everything obviously looks like it's working out just great. I'm going to go ahead and do this right here. Actually, you know what? Let's wait a second on that. Let me make sure that I have that this guy over here is caught up. And it is. I'm going to toss you over to another screen. So this is a guest account that I made. And this is to show you what the player screen looks like. So player goes heads. And they're going to need the extension as well. So we're going to click on the extension. It loads up the initiative. And as you can see, first off, the player does not have any way to manipulate the initiative. However, he does get all the information. And if I go back over onto the other screen, then as you can see, when I increment it on the GM side, the player side keeps up with it as well. Now, next thing I am going to do, next feature to demonstrate here as part of the initiative is I'm going to rename Random Gobbo to Stealthy Gobbo. Alright, so you can see I renamed him, and he is Stealthy Gobbo because he is actually invisible. So as you can see, on the player's side, he actually disappeared off of the initiative bar tracker. And as I jump through initiative here, you can see that when it gets to the Stealthy Goblin's turn on the GM side, the macro bar is not highlighted, nothing is selected on the screen, and the initiative does not have a character selected on it either. So that hides that information from the players as well. And that is all the features of the initiative tracker. As far as I can tell, that is a completely implemented initiative tracker. I can't think of any other features that should be added, but if you have any that you think should go on there, by all means go ahead and let me know, and or go over to the GitHub and submit a go ahead and write it up yourself and submit a pull request, and we'll implement it. So let's hop back over to the main page here, the GM's screen. Oh, also, sorry, let me hop back over here. As you can see, no GM token in the characters. That should be privated. Make sure that is privated. It's supposed to default to privated. The players should not have access to the GM token. Preferably, I wouldn't even want the GM to have access to the GM token, but that does not appear to be possible. So we'll talk more about that later in the second half when we talk about technical aspects. But that is not a token that anybody, or a character I should say more specifically, that anybody at all, player or GM, should be touching. That is purely back-end information that is necessary. So that is where we're standing. So earlier when I was editing characters over here, you may have noticed something if you use a Mythic Table that you're not used to seeing, which is these green boxes right here. So this is the copy character button, and this is important because, for example, in my campaign, one major problem that I ran into, well, major inconvenience I should say, is my players, the way I organize it is each dungeon is a campaign, quote unquote, in Mythic Table. So if we come back up here and I go back to this list here, I would make a new campaign for each dungeon, and then each dungeon would have all its maps. inside that campaign. I didn't want to put all the dungeon maps in one folder because that just gets messy, so I decided to organize it this way. However, when we move over to another campaign, then the players do not have their character tokens. So I implemented a copy token button, which is what we saw earlier. So earlier, this was grayed out and this said none because we did not have any characters copied to the extension. We now have Barty McBardface copied to the extension, and we can hit paste character. And this works for both characters and tokens. So if you have a token that you modified on the field and want to copy that instead of copying the character out of the box, you can go ahead and still copy it, and it will copy all that information out and work just fine. And if we drag Barty McBardface to the field here, first off, you can see that initiative is populated, even though we changed campaigns. I should have mentioned that one. But all his features are exactly the same, which is why I brought up the token design, the token style here. As you can see, it is still this tile design, large and purple background, so it copied those attributes as well. So that is all the features I've implemented right now. This has been, frankly, an extremely long process because there are basically Mythic Table is built off of Vue/Vuex, and while I am not terribly familiar with Vuex and only slightly familiar with Vue, the problem here is that the way those things handle things is kind of model based, so things get very convoluted very quickly. Basically, the way you write a Vue app is you tell it all the things that could show up and how they should be displayed, and then you just leave it to Vue to get things looking right and in the right places and generate basically templates. And for that reason, because it's a computer doing it, things can get really out of whack. So at this point, now that we're done showing you all the features, I'm going to go ahead and run through the code that I have written for this. Just some features of it. We don't actually have to talk about everything, but I want to touch on some of the major features. So if you were just here for the tutorial on the extension itself, hop on over to GitHub and download it for yourself and go ahead and play with it. Otherwise, here we go. So Vuex, as far as I understand it, just looking at the documentation, which frankly the documentation is not great, but it just basically appears to be a data storage solution. And the first major hurdle that we run into here is that, as you can see from this dev note here, because Vue is just randomly throwing stuff together, and Vue, Vuex, whatever, the paths to all the objects can be a bit arbitrary. I thought I had all the paths. I had a list of paths here where you could find, for example, the store, which is one of the most important items in this whole entire application, and that is the Vuex store. It's where it stores information, states, and mutations, etc. Basically the model, it stores the model that the program is based off of, again, as I understand it. And I had a list of them, and then I went ahead and came over to my streamer user, which is what we're on right now, as opposed to my home user. And when I got over here and booted up Mythic Table, those paths were no longer valid. So I decided at the end of the day that at this point I'm going to just have to recursively find, which is what this function is down here, the things we're looking for. So that is the first major hurdle that I had to overcome. And that's not necessarily something, if you're going to develop on top of this extension, if you're going to, create forks and pull requests and whatnot, you don't necessarily need to worry about that too much. I'm pretty sure I have all that taken care of. But these are the most important things right here, which is the store, the state, and the cache. So the cache, it's one of these things. The state kind of overlaps with the cache. It just has different features on it. Most of the time, if you're just using getters, just go to the cache and pull stuff from there. If you need to modify stuff, that's where you need the state from. You definitely need the state from. And then store just basically, again, is the top level object, effectively speaking. And that's where we'll find most of the stuff. Play tokens, however. These are the tokens that are active on the screen. So basically, you have characters, you have tokens, and characters and tokens do not necessarily overlap, it doesn't seem like, and I say that only because you can create a token and then delete the character that you created the token off of. So if you hop back over here to, I'll just come over here to the, over here. So these are characters over here, and these are represented in the back end as their own unique objects. And then these are tokens over here. But if I deleted one of these guys right here, which I can't because this is a guest account, but if I delete one of these guys, that would not remove the token over here. However, when we change maps and change campaign, well, changing campaigns will do a whole, suite of things. But when we change maps, the play tokens that are available actually do change as well. And those, again, are going to be independent. Play tokens are what's necessary to handle the UI, what's actually on the canvas here. This is a canvas. So in order to handle the canvas, you have to use play tokens, not tokens themselves. So these the play tokens that are visible on the screen will be linked back to a token object in the back end, which we're just talking about. But the token object in the back end is not linked back to a character. So that's the deal there. That's another thing to understand about how this whole entire system works. Let's see. Next up, View has actions and it has mutations. And you subscribe to mutations and you subscribe action to actions. This .subscribe and subscribe action are shorthands, and this allows for a little bit of filtering because the ViewX subscribe and subscribe action do not actually filter based on what you want. So for up here, if we look at this, you can see that I'm filtering on game state set base, game state clear. Over here on initiative, I've got collections add, remove, patch, etc. So those are all filters that I've implemented in the app, and you can take advantage of that instead of listening directly on the store. So you can see down here inside of subscribe, what I do is I do store.subscribe, and then I have this dynamic function right here, which will go ahead and filter against any filters you supply if you supplied filters. So there is that. That's another thing that needed to get implemented. A bunch of utility functions in here. And I think as an overview, that's all the necessary things I have to... Oh, yeah. So actually, there's one more very important thing. Over here in pop-up, and this is why you have to, when you start the Mythic extension, you have to actually trigger the page action. You have to click on the browser extension in the top right in order to actually get anything on the screen. And that is because the pop-up the pop-up injects scripts into the web page. And that is necessary because the only way to get access to the View store is via the web page itself. So if we look at execute script here, right here, this world main is the key ingredient. You have to do Chrome scripting, execute script, and target the main world. If you do not do that, if you are inside of a context script or inside of this pop-up and just want to try to get some values off the DOM, it does not work. You have to inject code directly into the web page in order to get access to this store and all the other ViewX features. So that is the other major hurdle that had to be overcome when implementing these features, is that there was no easy way and everything needs to be injected directly into the web page. Again, I would prefer to use context scripts, but unfortunately that does not work. Yeah. So, let's see, what else to talk about? So a lot of this stuff is just basically back-end stuff that you wouldn't necessarily need to worry about. What I've done is, and honestly at this point, I'm not sure how useful all this stuff is right here, but I've broken it down into plugins is how I'm handling it. And basically, we always need to know these two things, or actually these three things, I'm sorry. We need to know these three things for everything. These pop-up buttons are probably unnecessary at this point. However, why these are important is because we're injecting the file into the DOM, into the web page, into the tab. And as soon as we inject this file, we don't actually know whether or not that file has been injected. So therefore, if it has been injected, then we actually need to flag it on the DOM somehow to find out. And the way we do that is via this check class and instance. So this will inject script. You see right here, execute script. So this will inject some more script into the DOM and check for the class name and check for the instance variable and send that back to us. And that all feeds down to this check and establish plugin, which, as you can see here, we check the class and instance, which is what the function we just looked at. Then we pass that on to establish plugin, which if it's injected, then we if it is injected and initialized, we don't need to do anything. So if let's go ahead and just hop over here to initiative really quick as a demonstration. When this is first injected, down here at the bottom, as you can see, window, it sets the class on the window. This is the global variable here, and it checks for an instance of itself already. If it doesn't find an instance of itself already, then it creates a new instance. And that, again, is what we're checking for over here. So we're checking for the class instance right here, and we're checking for the actual initialized instance here. So if both of those things are good, we don't need to do anything. If the class is there, but we don't have the class instance, then we just pass in the code to create a new class instance. And otherwise, we go ahead and inject the plugin file, as you can see right here, because that means if we don't have the class or the instance, that means that we need to actually inject the whole entire file, because that was supposed to happen down here at the bottom of the file. And again, just to reiterate, this is on popup.js, so this is the page action. This all happens when you click on the pop-up. And down here, you can see all that in action. So first off, we need to grab the tab that we're actually manipulating in order to make our life easier. Otherwise, we got to grab the tab each and every single time. For sake of convenience, we just save it up here to var tab ID. And whenever we use execute script, it automatically populates it from there. Otherwise, check and establish each of the plugins, and then we can update the UI. Updating the UI is just doing things like disabling the paste character if we do not have a copy character, and if we do have a copy character, copying its name. I had it implemented a couple different ways earlier, and this update UI was more complicated. At this point, this is the only feature. However, if we add more features, we can add more stuff to the pop-up window, and that stuff can all be updated. And then we also have update extension ID. Now this is important for getting the copy character. The copy character, because that is a button on the DOM, that needs to communicate back to the extension. So we use runtime send message, and we need the extension ID. How we do that is very simply inside of popup. Let's hit F12 here. As you can see, we get our ID, which is chrome.runtime.id, and pass that over, or set that rather, on the MTE. The MTDE, for the record, is the base app. This base Mythic Table extension app is windows.mte, window.mte. You may need that if you are extending this module. You'll need to know that because that is where all the useful stuff lives. That's how you get access to the state, the store, the GM token right there, or GM character more specifically, right there. So that is how that works. Now, I think I've covered all the higher level stuff at this point. So more specifically, let's talk about the GM token. The GM token is how I've started to pass information around. So when we are over here on the initiative list and we see the initiative, let me get back to that one on the DM's page. And let me refresh the page really quick. Just a minute. Okay. And we pass it around. Oh, I minimized that, it looks like, so you can't see that. Oh no, it just crashed. Excellent. Let's see. I'm going to open up. The funny thing is that it actually doesn't say there's any errors there, so I'll have to investigate that. It's one of those things, always good to have a on-stream disaster. So this feature right here, where we track, where we keep sync between the GM and the players on initiative, that is one of the things that the GM character is used for. So let me hop over here, and on the GM page, if I open up GM character, you can see right here at current initiative, and we got this code right here. This is a token ID. So whenever the GM character is updated, that will trigger an event which things can listen to. At this point, only the initiative is listening for it, but when the GM character is changed, the initiative will see that signal that's been changed, and then come in here and check for this tag right here, the current initiative tag, and whatever that is what it will update everything to match. So if this is, let me go ahead and just click this down one. Now you can see that this is different, ends in ECF. Click it one more time, ends in EFD. It was ECF before, so that is how that works. So if you plan on creating another plugin to do something else, and you need some way to sync information between the characters or the players rather, and the DM, this is probably what you want to use. You'll probably want to create a new tag to implement in here, and then update that as necessary, and have your plugin listen for changes to the GM token. So if we go over here to initiative, and it's actually down here, so you can see listening for collections patch. That's the signal we're listening for, and the payload collection is going to be characters, and we just hop over to update current. So actually, let me F12 here. This gets GM info, as you can see up here. We create a default list of attributes that we want. Get the GM character off of the MTE, again MTE being over here, and get GM, or GM character rather, guess the character by name. The reason we have to get character by name, unfortunately, is I tried setting the ID manually and it just does not work. Evidently, I'm assuming the IDs are universal in Mythic Table, set by the server, and they aren't just random UIDs. They look like random UIDs, but if you watch them, it seems like they go in order. So since they go in order, that means that the server, I guess, has a counter in somewhere in its code, and that internal counter provides you with the ID. That's my assumption right now. I don't have access to the backend, so etc. Well, so one of those things, I did hop on their GitLabs to try to investigate some stuff. I did download their source code and have been through it a few times trying to find information. And I have gotten a good bit of information from it, but since I'm not familiar enough with Vuex, I haven't looked that deeply into how it generates the IDs. However, the point being, again, is that when we get the GM character, we have to do it by name instead of by ID. Anyway, back over here, we were getting the GM info, guess the GM token, or GM character rather, sorry, and then it just regex out what it needs. So up here at the top, I have a list of regexes to compare the tags to. There's the current initiative regex right there. And boom, boom, boom. This is update, get. There we go. So gets that. And if we get a match on the regex, then we update the out and return the out. And we were in update current, so here we are. So back to here, and then basically all the other magic stuff, which is updating the UI. That's what the rest of this is. And then likewise, as you might imagine, our increment and decrement, get the GM info, and then update the GM info with the new IDs. Very simple, straightforward. I won't go through all the code immediately. But that is more or less an overview of how the initiative app works, just to give you an idea of what you might use the GM token for and how you would go about manipulating it, and etc, etc, etc. Another thing to note is that we do need to keep track if we're handling characters and tokens, then we need to keep track of when we leave a campaign and when we enter a new campaign. Game state /clear seems like a reasonable signal to listen to, in my experience, for when we're exiting a campaign. And then game state set base seems to happen at the end after a campaign has been fully loaded. So those are two signals that you may want to know. And also notice that these are subscribe actions. These are actions, not mutations. So those are two things you may want to know, depending on how exactly any plugin you want to write for this works. And let's see, I think that is actually everything. The background file here just listens for the copy character thing and saves it to storage. There's nothing really special to say there. Copy character is very straightforward. Again, we inject some code onto the DOM, and then when the copy button is pushed right here, it calls copy character, which sends the message. I talked about that before when we were talking about extension ID. And paste character. This is a little interesting. So actions. We get the character. So just to overview how this works, we get the character back out of the storage. That's how we get to paste character here. We get the character back out of storage via the pop-up. The pop-up sends this to this app on the web page. This app on the web page then changes the campaign ID to match the active campaign ID, because obviously it needs to match. Otherwise, I don't know what would happen. I actually haven't tried. I just knew that would be a bad idea to try pasting a character with a different campaign ID into the current campaign. And then down here, and this is what I was getting to, the store actions are a little funny. It's going to have a whole list of actions you can use, but each one of them, as far as I can tell, is a single element array. So you actually need to get the first element and then pass it in whatever it's looking for. I have found some actions, for example, which one, where was that? It might be on selected. It might be on select token. Let me see. This is regress fine. Oh, is select token over an initiative? It might be. There was one action that I tried using, and it just plain did not work. And I could not figure out why. I'm trying to see if I can't remember. But obviously, I worked around it at this point. And it's no longer an issue. But I can't remember which one it is. So, not terribly important. Just, again, the only reason to bring it up is because some actions evidently expect information that you are not expecting. I believe it was either a character update or a token update function. Something like that. That I thought I could just pass in the character, and it was looking for something else entirely, and I did not understand it. So, that's the deal there. Again, turned out not to be an issue because there were other ways to solve the problem. But that is that. And yeah, I think you have been fully primed now on how exactly this whole entire extension works and how to go about implementing another plugin if you wanted to. Again, you can go ahead and add the information to pop-up. would be a good way of doing it in my opinion. So you would just extend this list down, add whatever it is, just so you know you have all this information because this information is necessary, and then toss it down here at the bottom. You know, just check and establish it after that, and everything else, you know, depends on what exactly you want your plugin to do. Oh, also you may have to update UI. I may change this. There's, you know, potentially we could rather have update UI as an attribute up here, and as part of the check and establish plugin function, or as part of the main update UI function that could just call each plugin's update function. Again, there's different things that we could do here. As you can see from this dev note right here, I have gone through a couple different ways of implementing this whole entire extension. So this whole entire stacked list of all the different plugins may change in the future. We may instead just iterate through the plugins object, iterate through this, and just for each function call, or each plugin rather, call check and establish and update UI, for example. So that is, like I said, everything. Yep. Pretty sure there's no more information that is necessary. Again, as soon as I log off here, as soon as I end the stream, I will go ahead and update the description to include the GitHub link. And by the time you watch this, assuming you're watching this in the future, that means you will have immediate access to the GitHub link and can start playing with it, either, you know, as a user or as a developer. And eventually, obviously, the developers over at Mythic Table hopefully will get much of this implemented, so this will be less useful in the future. However, depending on what other plugins that people make for this, it may continue to have use even after some of its core features, for example the initiative tracker, have been officially implemented in the main product. So let's see, last thing I'll say before signing off is I do want to state that this has taken like forever. Again, not being familiar with Vuex, not being terribly familiar with Vue rather, and not being familiar at all with Vuex. There was a lot of stuff I had to figure out by trial and error. The main guy on the Discord, the main admin, was very responsive, but he passed me off, and I really appreciate that. I should say, you know, I was really appreciative that he was very responsive to me when I opened up the ticket. I opened up a ticket to ask some questions, and he immediately responded and got developers on board to try to help me. Unfortunately, the other developers were like, oh yeah, that's awesome, and then 2 weeks later, literally 2 weeks later, I still hadn't heard back from them. So unfortunately, I would have preferred to have this extension up and posted 2 weeks ago, you know, when I first started working on it, but you know, that is what it is. Again, I'm grateful that the main admin over there was so responsive, but you know, kind of sucks that the guys that he tried to get help me didn't really do much. Let's see, and yeah, that is it from me. So as always, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you have a great and wonderful day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you're at in the world, and I'll catch you next time.